Tonight at 10, we're in Belfast at a time of growing uncertainty for the people of Northern Ireland. We talk to local firms about the state of the economy as inflation across the UK reaches levels not seen for a decade.
I've been in this business 29 years and I've never experienced this. Not the sustained price increases. I don't see an end to it at the minute.
Cost of living is rising sharply due to higher fuel and energy prices, the cost of second-hand cars and the cost of eating out. We'll be asking whether rising inflation is likely to lead to a jump in interest rates. Also today.
Another U-turn, Prime Minister.
Boris Johnson admits he made mistakes in handling the Tory lobbying scandal, but he doesn't apologise.
The committee will agree that I've accepted that it was a mistake and that it was my mistake.
Everybody else has apologised for him, but he won't apologise for himself. A coward, not a leader.
We talked to the former Yorkshire cricketer Azim Rafiq about racist abuse and what he hopes to achieve by going public. And a year in the life of Northern Ireland, we ask people to share their experiences in a changing landscape.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News Channel, a big night of action in the Women's Champions League. Arsenal are looking to take a big step towards the knockouts with a win over Danish side Køge.
Nice ball through. And there's
Welcome to BBC News at 10, which comes tonight from the heart of Belfast at a critical time in the history of Northern Ireland. There is growing uncertainty here about the future of trading arrangements with the rest of the United Kingdom, not to mention the links with its close neighbour, the Republic of Ireland, and the European Union. And today we'll be looking at all the day's news at home and abroad, as usual, but we'll also be looking more closely at some of the bigger questions facing the people of Northern Ireland at this time. And indeed, today's very sharp rise in the cost of living is a problem affecting people not just here, but right across the UK. Inflation is at its highest level in a decade. It rose to 4.2% last month, mainly due to higher fuel and energy prices, as well as the cost of second-hand cars and eating out. And it means that the current rate is more than double the Bank of England's official target of 2%. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, is here in Belfast, and this is his report.
Here at Harlequin, a fuel and waste tank manufacturer in Moira, County Down, it's not just that energy prices have nearly doubled. Inflation is everywhere. From the plastic raw materials prices up 50%, freight prices up 12% that morning, and worker wages having to go up well over 4%.
If we just stand still, it'll cost us an extra £2 million next year to manufacture the same product.
Exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same product, same levels, quantities, £2 million.
And that's the cost of energy?
Energy, labour, transport, raw materials. It's just, it's unsustainable. I've been in this business 29 years and I've never experienced this. Not the sustained price increases. I don't see an end to it at the minute.
In homes across the UK, energy prices are already biting, with fears now that mortgage costs will also have to go up. Self-employed mum of three Susie Grazier from Hartlepool says it's hard to make ends meet.
Our energy bills have shot up. They've probably more than doubled in the last year. The cost of fuel for the car, I noticed only last week. Normally, where I would fill the car, I'd put £40 in and it didn't even half fill it. And the shopping, the cost of the weekly shop has probably gone up by 20 to 30% compared to this time last year.
Massive rises in fuel costs mean many households are unable to switch suppliers right now. The energy price cap has protected British households from most of this, but last month's hike in the cap was responsible for half of today's increase in the inflation rate. So inflation is higher than expected, but the period of rising prices is also lasting longer than expected. The essential question is just how much longer. And the risk is this could become a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where businesses expecting prices to rise put them up in advance. And the critical question here is what happens to workers' wages. Wages are going up significantly at big supermarkets to account for competition for workers. Lidl is hiking starter pay by over 6%.
It is a challenge, absolutely. We're competing for talent with all the other retailers and indeed other industries. And part of the reason for today's announcement is to secure our staff who are with us, to retain them as far as possible, but also to attract anyone else who would like to come and join this fantastic team.
Wages going up in sectors with worker shortages, such as retail or haulage, is to be expected. But if this happens across the entire economy, the Bank of England's festive gift to the nation might have to be a pre-Christmas interest rate rise to try to keep price rises under control.
And Faisal is with me now on the waterfront here in Belfast. You've been talking to lots of people today, Faisal. Just on this business of rising inflation, we were told before that this was going to be a temporary thing, a bit of a blip. Is that what it looks like now?
When is this going to end? It's the crucial question for households trying to plan their budgets, and for the Bank of England too, trying to plan where interest rates will go. And the bad news is that it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's because global energy prices have already baked in increases, further increases in domestic energy prices early next year, including a rise in the energy cap for Great Britain early next year that will take the inflation rate up to around 5%. But what happens after that is really quite interesting. The nature of this inflation is quite freakish. It's about the rebound from pandemic lockdowns all around the world. So you've seen demand rebound much faster than expected. Supply, the ability to produce things in the economy, has lagged that. And the difference between that is the inflation. So with that, you would expect it to kind of fall back again in the second half of next year. That's the expectation. And we are beginning to see some signs of that in the real economy. Used car prices, the third biggest contributor to today's big rise in inflation, that arises out of the fact that new cars aren't being produced because there's a shortage of microchips. Some signs from East Asia that microchip shortage is being sorted out. But that should take time, and the pressure on household budgets is going to be very real over this winter, and the crucial question is whether wages will rise to compensate for it.
Faisal, many thanks once again. Faisal Azim, our economics editor. Let's catch up with events at Westminster today, because the House of Commons voted this evening to limit the ability of MPs to take on a second job. But Labour, whose own proposals for improving standards were defeated, described the government's plans as just warm words rather than a proper plan of action. And earlier, Boris Johnson had admitted making a mistake in the way that he'd handled the controversy over Owen Paterson, the former Conservative MP who broke the rules on lobbying. Now, the government's measures would prevent MPs from having second jobs as paid consultants in relation to Parliament. It also wants to introduce limits to how many hours MPs could spend on external jobs. But Labour wants to ban all second jobs, except for those who are working in public services. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has the latest.
Has he boxed himself in?
Another U-turn, Prime Minister.
After a fortnight of claims of bad behaviour being chucked around this place, Boris Johnson finally conceded yesterday the rules for MPs have to change. But he hasn't untangled a political mess on display today at several times, in several ways.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Keir Starmer.
Everybody else has apologised for him, but he won't apologise for himself. A coward, not a leader. Yesterday, a screeching last-minute U-turn to avoid defeat on Labour's plan to ban MPs from dodgy second contracts. But waving one white flag won't be enough to restore trust.
Howls of protest began when Number 10 tried to change the rules to protect a former cabinet minister who'd broken them. Rules Boris Johnson only now says have to change.
What I think we need to do is to work together on the basis of the independent report by the Committee of Standards in Public Life.
The Prime Minister, though, also seems to have concluded the best form of defence is attack.
The Right Honourable Gentleman is now trying to prosecute others for exactly the course of action that he took himself.
Questioning Keir Starmer's earnings as a lawyer when an MP, but before he was leader.
Who paid?
This kind of telling off does not happen every day.
Prime Minister, sit down. Prime Minister, I'm not going to be challenged. You may be the Prime Minister of this country, but in this House, I'm in charge, and we're going to carry on.
Downing Street wants to stop this saga sliding into a full-blown emergency. But MPs on all sides are angry about how the case of Owen Paterson unfolded, and they want to take the time to show it.
And Prime Minister, I request that you give us your customary extra time.
Even if he looked like he'd rather be anywhere but here.
I will do my best to oblige you as ever, Sir Bernard. I've got quite a lot on.
The danger is that you've just tarred the whole of the House with the same brush, and yourself, haven't you?
The intention genuinely was not to exonerate anybody. The intention was to see whether there was some way in which, on a cross-party basis, we could improve the system.
You have a responsibility to go above and beyond,
yes, of course
to go
I do.
further than everybody should expect,
I do.
and to actually establish much higher standards.
I do. Yes. I think it was a total mistake not to see that Owen's breach of the rules, Owen, the former member for North Shropshire's breach of the rules, made any discussion about anything else impossible.
Sometimes Westminster loves nothing more than a row about itself, but this shambles matters because it's shaken the Tory confidence in number 10, given the opposition plenty of ammunition, and fairly or unfairly, it does taint the image of this place. As a frantic day drew to a close, Labour's effort to change the rules failed.
Order.
But government MPs backed Boris Johnson's proposal to limit some outside earnings in future. But listen.
The ayes to the right, 297. The noes to the left, 0.
Less than half of the Commons backed it. The chance of settling this saga amicably is slim indeed. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Now, here in Belfast, there is intense interest in the latest talks held between Lord Frost, that's the government's Brexit negotiator, and political and business leaders in Northern Ireland. Lord Frost said today that a deal can be done with the European Union over the future of trading links in the wake of the Brexit agreement. The Northern Ireland Protocol, which was signed by the UK and the EU, is designed to avoid the re-emergence of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. But the UK, Lord Frost is saying this, wants the protocol rewritten and is threatening to trigger what is called Article 16 unless things change.
We want to reach an agreement if we can. It's got to be an agreement that does the job and changes the situation, not an agreement for its own sake. If we can't get to that, then obviously Article 16 is a possibility, and a very real possibility. But it will be determined on the basis of whether we've reached an agreement or not, and that's what we're really trying very hard to do.
Lord Frost there, speaking earlier today here in Belfast. Our Northern Ireland economics editor John Campbell has joined me. And John, what's the latest on the state of these talks? People, in fairness, probably have some difficulty keeping up with them, and they're rather complex. What's your understanding?
Well, the EU does acknowledge that the protocol is causing real difficulties for businesses in Northern Ireland when they try to bring goods in from the rest of the UK. So they've come up with a package of measures which they say should help ease the situation. Now, it's fair to say the government is pretty sceptical about whether those measures will work. And tonight we learn that the chairman of Marks and Spencer's has also written to the government to say he is also sceptical about the EU proposals. But nonetheless, the two sides are still talking. However, Lord Frost and the Prime Minister are clear that if these talks don't produce the result which they want, they will use Article 16. And it's basically a safeguard measure which allows either side to say, listen, this deal is causing serious difficulties, they're liable to persist, therefore we have the right to suspend the parts of the deal which are causing the problems. Now, the government says it's completely legitimate to do that. But what the EU is very concerned about is the government could use Article 16 as a pretext to effectively walk away from pretty much everything they'd agreed on Northern Ireland just 2 years ago. And in the most extreme circumstances, they could retaliate by suspending the broader Brexit deal. But we will have a better sense of where these talks are going when Lord Frost meets his EU counterpart in Brussels on Friday.
OK, John, many thanks for the update. John Campbell there for us with the latest on the state of those talks. Now let's move on to some of the day's other news, because police have revealed that the man who detonated a bomb in a Liverpool taxi had been buying components for that device for several months. Detectives say that Emad al-Swalamin, who was originally from Iraq, had suffered periods of mental illness. He died when the improvised device he built exploded in the taxi on Remembrance Sunday. Our special correspondent Ed Thomas has been speaking to a couple who were just metres away from the blast.
The explosions just went off and it shook the hospital building. And then I go closer to the car and I can smell the smoke. And I could see the man in the back.
The moments Liam and Stephanie will never forget. As David Perry's taxi rolls in, they were just metres away.
So that's my car there, with my girlfriend Steph inside. And then the explosion happens and you'll see Steph. Steph gets out the car, I grab her and push her to the side so she goes to reception where she's safe.
What are your emotions in these moments?
I was just on pure adrenaline and I was just, my biggest fear was her getting hurt.
Everyone was like, oh my God, is there a baby in the back? So I think that's why I'd come running back out and I was like, is there a baby in the back? And then obviously we did find out there was a passenger, so everyone was screaming like, it's 999, that there was a passenger.
Liam runs back towards the car. He sees the driver, David Perry, is out and safe. He pauses before returning to try and save the life of the bomber, Ahmad Al-Swalmeen.
And then I go closer to the car and I can smell the smoke. I could see the man in the back. And as I tried to I went to go grab him, but the flames became, he engulfed in flames very quickly. And I couldn't reach a hold of him without setting myself on fire.
Steph is 20, Liam 21. Both are now struggling to cope with what happened.
It does cause me to feel sick and my head hurts when I think about it and my adrenaline, just because I'm losing that sleep.
So it's obviously like just replaying in your mind the whole situation, and then when you've finally got to sleep, it's in your dreams, so you can't really escape it in a sense.
And today, police revealed the man responsible, Ahmad Al-Swalmeen, planned this since April and rented a property here as a base to build the bomb. During 7 years in the UK, his repeated asylum applications had been refused, and in that time, he'd suffered periods of mental illness. Once you found out this was now a terrorism investigation, what was your reaction to that?
So you wouldn't think anyone would ever want to harm, particularly babies and children more than anything. And
of all hospitals, a baby's hospital really. You just don't think that. I was just in disbelief.
It's scary just to think about how things could have been different, to be honest. You do struggle with, is that ever going to happen again? Am I going to get over this? And obviously, I've said to myself and my family, I'm not going to let it affect me. It's not going to have a hold on me or like my life.
There's definitely someone watching over me that day. Yeah. Definitely someone watching over both of us.
But I do feel very lucky.
Very lucky to be alive.
It was Liam Spencer there, ending that report by our special correspondent, Ed Thomas. Now, an investigation has been launched after a British military fighter jet crashed soon after takeoff into the Mediterranean. The Ministry of Defence confirmed that the pilot on board the F-35 jet ejected from the aircraft before it crashed. The pilot is safe. The F-35s, estimated to be worth £100 million each, are based on board the HMS Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier. Now, the former Yorkshire cricketer Azim Rafiq has said that his evidence to MPs yesterday about racism in the sport was more powerful than anything he could have done on the cricket pitch. He gave details to a Westminster committee about the racial abuse that he'd suffered as a player. Mr. Rafiq says he's determined that this will be the moment that sport and much of society as a whole moves in a different direction. He's been talking to our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
He's gone from county cricketer to game-changing whistleblower. And a day after taking his allegations of institutional racism to Westminster, Azim Rafiq told me he'd been overwhelmed by the response he'd received.
I'm incredibly relieved. Felt like a massive weight off my shoulders. Spoke to my dad last night.
What did he say?
He was just really proud of me. And he said, look, all that no runs or wickets could have done what I did yesterday. And I should be really proud of myself.
Rafiq's harrowing testimony to MPs laid bare the racism he suffered at his former club.
I'm very determined that this is going to be looked back as the moment where not only sport but society as a whole went in a different direction to what it's been going. It's really important that we don't let this moment go and we try and use this moment as a real watershed moment for the future.
The ECB has been criticised for their handling of the crisis. Chief Executive Tom Harrison admitting to the committee that the sport he runs was facing an emergency over diversity.
He's probably got a few months where we need to see some tangible changes, and I think if it's not something that changes in the next few months, then I think the patience is going to run out.
On a chastening day for cricket, several high-profile names, including former Yorkshire stars Matthew Hoggard and Tim Bresnan, both of whom have apologised to Rafiq, were dragged into the scandal. Tonight, ex-England batsman Alex Hales categorically denied any racial connotation in naming his dog, as alleged by Rafiq yesterday. Former England captain and now top pundit Michael Vaughan had already denied Rafiq's claim that he made a racist remark to a group of Asian players in 2009. So what does the whistleblower think should now happen to his old Yorkshire teammate?
People who apologise, they deserve a second chance. People in denial, unfortunately, I think there's got to be a level of accountability there, and it's for the employers to send out a message whether they are going to give a green light to racism or they're going to stamp it out.
With the crisis engulfing Yorkshire, more than 1,000 people have contacted an independent commission for equity in cricket since it was launched last week.
You're going to be heard, and whether anyone else stands by you or not, I'll stand by you.
Many hope this episode proves a wake-up call for the game's authorities, but regaining trust will not be easy. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
In America, 2 men convicted of the murder of the American civil rights leader Malcolm X are set to be exonerated. Malcolm X was shot dead in New York in 1965 as he prepared to give a speech. The Manhattan district attorney said that Muhammad al-Aziz and Khalil Islam did not get the justice they deserved. The conviction of a third man, Thomas Hagen, has not been overturned. Now, Poland's border force say that around 1,000 migrants are still gathered at the frontier with Belarus as the European Union stepped up its efforts to resolve the crisis. Tensions increased yesterday after Polish forces used tear gas and water cannon to stop migrants trying to enter the country. Our correspondent Jenny Hill sent this report from the Polish side of the border, and a warning, there are some flashing images coming up.
Fury, frustration at the gateway to Europe. Polish border guards released this footage. Night after night, they say Belarusian troops force migrants to try and breach the border. That's what Sagvan told us too.
And say, go, 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 go. Every people must go. He tell you, if you come back, I'll shoot you. I'll kill you.
Sagvan and his family are now recovering in a Polish hospital. They paid more than $10,000 to get to the border, spent more than 2 weeks trapped there in the cold with almost no food or water.
You don't know what's happening there. It's so difficult. You see a child asking you bread.
The Polish government would prefer you not to see the human tragedy unfolding in what is one of the most beautiful parts of this country. This is tourist terrain, but visitors, journalists, aid workers are now banned from the forests which line the border.
This is a special place, yes.
Slavek's bike hire business is in the exclusion zone. Like others here, he tells us it's commonplace to see migrants hiding in the woods, afraid Polish guards will push them back.
We're not going to change it by building fences. It's up to us to manage it so tourism can go on. But it should happen in a humanitarian way. It's unacceptable that someone freezes to death 100 metres from my house.
At least 8 people have died on the Polish side. In 6 weeks at this small local hospital, they've treated nearly 200 migrants.
It's extremely difficult when we are faced with this suffering, when you have to tell a husband that his wife isn't going to survive, or when we see a family being separated because the father is taken away by the border guard and the mother and child stay at the hospital.
It's starting to get dark now and the temperature is beginning to drop. Tonight, as they do every night, people will try to get across the border, make it to these forests. This is testing the fundamental values of this community, this country, the EU itself. But for the people who end up in this woodland, this is simply about survival. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Biała Wiesia Forest.
The Queen has held her first official engagement. It was at Windsor Castle since she missed Sunday's remembrance service in Whitehall. Her Majesty met the outgoing Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir Nick Carter, days after she cancelled her attendance at the Cenotaph for that Remembrance Sunday service. The Queen was said to have sprained her back. Prince of Wales, who's on a trip to Jordan, was asked today about Her Majesty's condition.
No, she's all right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is she okay?
Yes,
We
yes.
send our best wishes.
But once you get to 95, you know, it's not quite as easy as it used to be. Bad enough at 73.
That was the Prince of Wales speaking on a visit to Jordan today. Let's have a take a look then at the latest figures on the pandemic throughout the UK. There were 38,263 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. It means on average there were 38,980 new cases reported per day in the past week. 201 deaths were recorded. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. On average in the past week, 146 related deaths were recorded every day. And on the progress of the booster vaccine, almost 13.5 million people have now had their booster injection. Let's stay on the theme of the pandemic and COVID, notably here in Northern Ireland, because earlier this evening, ministers here have approved the use of vaccine passports, principally for hospitality venues and for large gatherings. And I'm joined now by our Ireland correspondent, Emma Vardy, who's been keeping tabs on all of this. Let's have a sense of what the reaction's likely to be, Emma.
Well, look, there's resentment from the hospitality industry because lots of pubs and restaurants feel they've already had to deal with the toughest rules for the longest. They're saying to ministers, look, thanks a lot, you've lumped all this on us again. And many believe that COVID passports will be difficult to police on the ground. But all the parties in Northern Ireland backed this measure today, apart from the DUP, and one DUP Assembly member swearing he would never hold a COVID passport in his hand. So this brings up some really strong feelings. But ministers were presented with stark modelling today. They were told if something isn't done in the next few weeks, we will be going back to stricter restrictions. And Huw, we've had a pretty grim year of that here already. Nightclubs only opened a fortnight ago. And I've been looking back on what's been a really significant year of challenges for communities in Northern Ireland, not only in terms of the pandemic, but also the economy and, of course, the politics of Brexit.
This place is used to struggles, but the past year has tested Northern Ireland in ways no one foresaw.
We fully appreciate that this will be a difficult and worrying news.
We're past the point of warnings. This is real and it's happening now.
While life-saving medical teams faced unprecedented strain, calls for help in communities increased as Northern Ireland endured coronavirus restrictions for longer than any other part of the UK. And volunteers like Victor, who himself had previously been homeless, were suddenly on the front line.
Just that interaction with people on the door, children needing stuff, mummies, daddies, people who probably for the first time ever had to ask for something. We can't pay our mortgage. We need food.
This Belfast food bank says the pandemic led to greater collaboration between different communities than ever before. For an often divided part of the UK, the pandemic brought a short-lived sense of unity. But as lockdown eased, old divisions returned.
The disorder last night was at a scale that we have not seen in recent years.
Protests in loyalist areas over Brexit and other issues turned to violence. Rioters on both sides of these peace walls were mainly young people and teenagers. And street disorder has begun to flare up again in recent weeks I've come to meet a group on the nationalist side of this peace wall that have got together to try to intervene.
We're a group of young men. The last thing we want to see is kids getting hurt, kids getting arrested.
How has the issue of Brexit and the protests around that, I suppose, helped to exacerbate any tensions?
These kids don't understand Brexit, they don't understand the protocol, they don't understand, the intricacies of the political situation here, but they're listening to people that are older than them, they're listening to their parents. At the end of the day, this is a post-conflict society.
And this has been the focal point of a year of political tension. New checks on goods crossing the Irish Sea, the Northern Ireland Protocol, which many businesses say they want to make work to their advantage. But it's viewed in loyalist communities as a betrayal of their place in the UK.
If we do not kill this protocol, it will kill the Union.
But step beyond the politics of this island, and it's also been a year when people rediscovered what was on their doorstep.
Well, this was a place where I came all the time when nothing else was open, and a lot of people had the same idea.
People needed to have a bit of a routine of some sort.
This past year saw the hills over Belfast become packed with walkers. After Vivian lost his job during the pandemic, he started up his own group.
I really appreciated the things that we have rather than the things that we don't have.
Has the past year changed us?
Definitely. You see people out walking that you would never have seen out walking before.
But there's still uncertainty about the winter ahead.
To say that the worst is behind us, I mean, nobody can answer that question.
You can't look away from the fact that the army have been drafted in to help with the COVID wards here. We might have another lockdown, but with all this wonderful nature around us, we will get through it.
Northern Ireland still faces an uncertain future, but has found that a year of being kept apart, in fact, brought many together. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
And that's all from a rather windy Belfast tonight. The city's looking magnificent, must be said, but it's pretty windy. We'll be visiting Glasgow, Cardiff and Salford in the coming weeks to consider the challenges being faced there as we approach the new year. But now, BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.